Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video on my Atypical Philosopher channel. I really appreciate you popping by. I'm sorry about my normal philosophical audience that I've let go for some time as I just don't have enough time in a day. Nonetheless, having this channel has been particularly useful, hopefully. I hope I have all my tabs in order here because I like to have my ducks in a row before I do things. I have so much to talk about with regard to military aid and geopolitics today. I am going to try and rush through this, but bear with me, it might be a long one. Okay, military aid. So, Ukraine has a right to use the German Taurus for strikes against military targets in Russia and occupied Crimea, says Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, the head of the Bundestag Defense Committee. Now, I don't know if this is binding, whether that's just her opinion. I don't know enough about this, but my goodness, that would be fantastic. And that, if Germany have said that, then that crosses a sort of line that others haven't crossed. Now, we're waiting to see whether Taurus is definitely going to be given anyway. There's talk about massive delays because of the Scholz's worries that it could necessitate German personnel being in Ukraine to train and sort things out, and that might be escalatory, so on and so forth. So the statement here, or the claim about what Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann has said is interesting in that context. Fantastic news, though, if A, they are given soon, and B, they're allowed to strike targets within Russia, because that changes a lot. Okay, small number of Ukrainian Air Force pilots have begun English language lessons in the Texas Air Base to prepare for the upcoming training of F-16 fighter jets. A couple of things to say. First of all, these aren't like the first echelon of people to be trained. This is like the secondary set of people who need their English to improve because of the nature of the training and also the machinery and the language that's involved within the machinery itself, as well as the delivering the training. So it's one of the prerequisites is a decent level of English. So they already have pilots who have that decent level of English that are going through the training, and I assume will presently be flying airframes, right? So this is for the second echelon who are going to be needing some English training before they get on the simulators and the airframe. So anyway, good news. The other thing I was going to say is that, as reported yesterday, with the government shutdown looming for the US government and the furlough of the Department of Defense staff, apparently that is going to affect training of pilots. So that is a worry in that regard. Okay, Zelensky's met with the Minister of Defense of Slovakia, Martin Sklenar. I'm going to talk about Slovakia in the geopolitical segment because it's super important. They are having elections this weekend, and it's looking like they're going to elect a former prime minister who is sitting on the left, who is actually not good for Ukraine. And it looks like they are going to, if he gets if he gets his way, then they're going to stop military aid to Ukraine, and that is a significant worry. Quote, among the main topics of the situation is the situation at the front, the priority needs of the defense forces of Ukraine, humanitarian demining, and the cooperation of our countries in this field. Thank you, Slovakia, for supporting Ukraine, the message states. Now, they have helped with things like Susanna and other pieces of military equipment, and indeed, they have given, I think, at least one Bzena 5, maybe a couple of them, to Ukraine. Well, here, a crowdfunding campaign in Slovakia has raised money to buy a Bzena 5 demining vehicle for Ukraine. Ukrainian foreign minister has said donors from Slovakia, Czech Republic and other countries along with the NATO online community contributed to Ukraine's cleanup of Russian mines. That's significant. These are decent bits of kit as far as I can work out. They are remotely controlled as far as I remember, so there is no one sitting in them, so that's safe for the personnel involved. Slovakia is an interesting one. I think Ukraine know that. Zelensky knows that, and there is absolutely no coincidence that he's meeting with the defense minister of Slovakia, given they've got elections this weekend. I'm positive of that. Right, Ukrainian surgeons have attended a 3-day reconstructive surgery course given by the UK's Defence Medical Services. The visiting surgeons learned modern reconstructive techniques to improve the functional recovery of patients back in Ukraine. Good news there. Fantastic. Thank you, UK, in that regard. Ukraine and Poland, quote, Ukraine and Poland will find a solution to the grain exports conflict without impacting negatively military aid to Ukrainian soldiers, said NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Hopefully that is the case. Hopefully the issues with regard to grain and vegetable and fruit imports and exports between the two countries is going to be resolved without affecting military assistance. Right, Switzerland has allocated $110 million for demining the territory of Ukraine from 2024 to 27. You said the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. The money is expected to be used to purchase special equipment and train Ukrainian deminers. This is really important. I've said this before. Like, on the one hand, it's very easy to get really peed off with Switzerland being militarily neutral and therefore not giving or allowing third-party exports of equipment that they have something to do with, or their own equipment, right? And that is annoying because you're like, hey, you've admitted publicly that Ukraine have been done over morally by Russia. It's like you've condemned Russia. You know who the bad guys are, but you're saying because we are neutral, we're not going to allow any equipment to that has anything to do with us to find its way to Ukraine. And that's annoying. And I've debated the whole neutrality thing before, and I've said it's completely at odds with having a defense export industry. You cannot have a defense export industry. Just practically speaking, you're going to lose out to competitors if there are other competitors that are willing to sell and not have these strict guidelines attached to them. So it's weird that you say, yeah, we're okay with selling arms. So you're not kind of neutral in the sense of we just don't do war. You're not pacifistic. We want to sell arms, so yeah, go and buy these arms, but you can't use them in war, or you can't be a warring partner or warring entity when we deliver these to you, and so on and so forth. And these strings attached just make no sense. So it's weird. But the flip side is, okay, if that's your position, I don't agree with that position. It's bonkers because you have very clearly said that Russia are the moral bad guys here. You've condemned Russia's activity. That's like seeing someone on the other side of the street get beaten up and say, that's really horrible, saying to the mugger, that's terrible, it's absolutely disgusting. Are you going to do anything to help? No. I'm going to stand here and say it's disgusting, but I'm not going to help you because I am neutral. So carry on. Okay, but I have a big problem with that, whatever. But the flip side is, okay, if you're looking at Ukraine and Ukraine need all this help, like 100 units of help, right? And there are two countries here. There's you and Germany. Germany have got, like, we've got 10 units for help, and Switzerland have got 10 units for help, right? And if Switzerland said we're not giving any military, then Germany says, okay, right, instead of me giving 5 units of military help and 5 units of humanitarian aid, right, I'll give 10 units of military aid, and you, Switzerland, give 10 units of humanitarian aid. And the end result is the same. The outcome is the same. So, okay, hold to your military neutrality. Sure, we can disagree with that, but fair enough. If you're going to do that, you have to step up with humanitarian aid, and you have to step up to the amount that you would have helped with military aid. So don't use that as an excuse not to help as much. You help as much, but you just help in that way, and we then don't have to help in that way. So Germany, for example, I'm just making this stuff up, but Germany can go, right, we'll just do military because you're doing humanitarian, right? And yeah, it's a kind of zero-sum game. Or positive-sum game, really. Both of us are helping, and we're both giving stuff. We're just giving different stuff. Right. Turkey's Baykar, so the guys that manufacture Bayraktar TB2 drones, the famous ones that were much touted at the beginning of the war, I think kind of oversold a little bit. Quite literally, actually, they sold a lot of drones on the back of that. Now, a couple of things to say. The guy that runs that is the son-in-law of Erdogan, who's the leader of Turkey, which is interesting. That's why Turkey is kind of sitting on a fence or speaking out both sides of the mouth. Actually, more siding with Ukraine, I think, on balance, but is still taking money in, effectively laundering Russian money in terms of buying properties. Russians are buying a lot of property in Turkey, as far as I understand it, and also tourism, etc., etc. A lot of money going through Turkey. So they're kind of getting the best of both worlds, especially since Turkey are on the precipice, economically speaking. They've had massive inflation. They're in a lot of trouble. Erdogan really should have been voted out, given the track record. Nonetheless, they are supporting Ukraine in some places where it really counts. Take the Bosphorus Straits and the Montreux Convention, they get to shut the Bosphorus Straits. That, as I've long argued, is probably one of the most important aspects of this war. The outcome of this war would not be, I don't think Ukraine could have hoped to have succeeded at all, to have prevailed at all, hoping that they will, given the access of the Russian naval fleet to the Black Sea. So shutting off the Bosphorus Straits to any warring naval vessels is a game changer. That was huge right from the beginning. Right, so Turkey are a big player here. Baykar are very much on Ukraine's side, very much, like morally speaking. Like they have given a bunch of stuff to Ukraine as much as they have sold a bunch of stuff. In fact, it appears that they've given $100 million worth of stuff. So they have given more aid as a single company than some European nations. Right, that is how big Baykar are. But they are investing $100 million in 3 projects in Ukraine, among them the construction of a drone production plant that will be completed in 1.5 years. Now, although this is a long-term thing, that's also good because it shows that there is going to be long-term sustainable help for Ukraine. So actually, it's great that you get you get frustrated. It's like, no, we want it now. Well, actually, this is a good sign for Ukraine. Second really important point is that this locks in Erdogan to helping Ukraine and being morally on side with Ukraine. His son-in-law and a big Turkish company is siding with Ukraine and building, manufacturing facilities and doing projects inside Ukraine. So that locks in Erdogan. So stuff like this has huge significance. Right. France is moving from mostly transferring weapons in its stocks to French companies starting to build co-production facilities in Ukraine. We're going to be talking a lot about this in a little while. Which is the more sustainable model. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about Baykar and how this is sustainable, and it gives Ukraine the chance to be able to help themselves. Okay, they're foreign companies, but there will be protection, there will be jobs inside Ukraine, there will be money staying inside Ukraine, and this will be not just about giving a man a fish, it's about teaching a man to fish. So this is really important. For now, it's mainly the small and medium-sized companies. It's important because France is the second biggest military exporter in the world. But I think they've overtaken Russia now. Russia just aren't anywhere near being able to export arms. But France is a huge player in the arms market, and actually they need to flex their muscles a bit more, and this looks like a way of doing it. Right, we are creating the world's first fleet of sea drones. We also started the production of guns and ammunition according to NATO standards, Zelensky said. That we're building now towards, literally now, I'm building you towards big announcement that has been made. But it's all to do with Ukraine's sustainability and being able to construct things themselves. They have their own innovative sectors, particularly drones, and you could argue, missiles. They're starting to get things like Neptune on track and so on and so forth. So they have the ability, but they're also going to be working a lot with foreign partners. But this is great, making their own guns, ammunition to NATO standards, and a fleet of sea drones. Ukraine are going to be the world leaders in maritime drones, I'm pretty sure. Or at least maybe not in designing and making them, but in the application of them and the use of them and the strategies and the tactics and so on and so forth. Okay, Yermak yesterday said Ukraine intends to organize the production of its own air defense systems. For this purpose, relevant specialists will come to our country. Okay, this is really big. So air defense systems is a top priority for Ukraine. I talked about that yesterday in my extra video, I think it was. Yes, so although they need tanks and IFVs and etc., actually they need air defense as their biggest priority, given the range of targets that Russia are now hitting and the attrition of air defenses, of course, as well. But the stockpiling of Russian cruise missiles and Shahed drones. Right, tomorrow, this was yesterday, Zelensky said tomorrow there will be important news for Ukraine, for our soldiers, for our entire state. So this is all quite cryptic. What's this all about? Well, we are working on the fact, says Zelensky, that in the coming weeks we will add strength to Ukraine, internal strength and necessary cooperation with the world, so that the world hears, understands and supports us. What is he talking about? Well, today it's just come out that Zelensky is launching a new alliance with global defense companies. A new initiative aims to jointly build defense capabilities against aggression and localize foreign weapons production on Ukrainian soil. So far, 38 companies from 19 countries have joined the Defense Industries Alliance. This is brilliant strategizing here, because if you want countries to help you, you have to basically say that it needs to be a gain for those countries. But up to this point, the reason why nations are helping with military and humanitarian assistance, but mainly military assistance to Ukraine, is because it's in their strategic best interests. The US aren't giving all these billions of dollars of aid because it's the morally right thing to do. I've said this plenty of times. That might be an aspect of it, but there are lots of morally right things to do where the US hasn't got involved. Say, for example, I don't know, Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. The US didn't get involved there. Why not? Because actually it's not in their strategic interest. It'll be money just frittered away. So the money, the reason why the US, and this is what people on the right, particularly in the US, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, why they don't really understand the politics and the geopolitics and the strategizing going on here. They aren't just giving money away because, I don't know, it's like Elon Musk said, why are we concentrating more on Ukraine than our own borders? Because it's in your best interest to do so. This is part of your geopolitical strategy that is hard baked into what the US is and where you are in the world. So you are giving this money not because it's charity. Actually, you're getting something back. There will be a massive return on investment for this in terms of the geopolitics, what's going on. But if you're going to add, right, so that gives you the foundation. Now, adding to this, if you're going to approach other nations and say, right, you've given us loads, you're getting towards the end of what you can give us, you need to give us more. How can we get something rolling where you give us more? So what Zelensky has done, as far as I understand it, and this is just me reading between the lines, but this is super clever, which is, okay, but if you are going to aid us with more military assistance, then you need to get not just the geopolitical benefit out of this, but also an industrial economic benefit out of this, which might also feed into defense technology and raising your level of knowledge and equipment and access to high capability equipment, right? There's loads of things that this then enables. So although with previous military assistance like HIMARS and so on and so forth, Lockheed Martin are doing very well out of this, Raytheon are doing very well out of this. Say, I'm using the US as an example, but the US, from their, as well as their geopolitical benefits for giving military assistance to Ukraine hitherto, they are also getting industrial benefit out of it. But this is very much taking it, I think, to these nations and saying, right, France, UK, BAE Systems, Leclerc or whatever, all these companies say, right, come and set up shop in Ukraine. Come and share your expertise. Come and make money out of this war. But in so doing, we get a benefit and you get a benefit. This is not a zero-sum game where you have your benefit is my loss or my benefit is your loss. And so therefore you zero-sum and you're left in the middle. This is a positive-sum game. So you put in stuff and we put in stuff and we all benefit. And actually, you could say the zero-sum game is and Russia loses, right? So that's your zero-sum. But just looking at you and us, like these 38 companies from 19 nations, this is benefiting Ukraine, it's benefiting those companies, and by extension, it's benefiting the nations from which those companies come. Hopefully I'm just all stream of consciousness, but hopefully that makes sense. So Zelensky has announced the creation of the Alliance of Defense Industries and Defense Fund. Declaration has already been signed by 13 prominent companies and that are ready to build a new arsenal for the free world, together with Ukraine. 252 defense companies from 30 countries, I think, is the intention. So it's huge. Different numbers being mentioned here by different sources, but you get the idea. This is why Zelensky was talking about this so much yesterday, bigging this up. This is a really big step. About 252 defense companies from over 30 American, Asian, Australian, and European countries joined Kiev's first defense industries forum. During the speech, Zelensky said that Ukraine, together with the companies included the alliance declaration, is ready to build the new arsenal of a free world. We have developed a basic declaration as a foundation of this alliance. It can be joined by weapons and military equipment manufacturers worldwide who share our intent to provide real protection against Russian aggression. There's not only a geopolitical positioning, but it's also an industrial economic positioning going on here. What else? Zelensky said Ukraine is developing a special economic regime for the defense industry to allow every company that works for defense to realize their potential. In addition, Zelensky also announced the creation of a special defense fund, which the defense ministry will operate. Right, two things there. So the way he's selling that is to realize your potential. He's going to these companies. You want to realize your potential. You're an economic entity, right? You can realize your potential by doing stuff for and with Ukraine. Positive sum game. And then he says, Zelensky said Ukraine is developing a fund as well, this special defense fund. Well, where's that defense fund going to be spent? Well, inside Ukraine, yes, possibly, but it's going to be spent on weapons. Well, yes, I say some of that will be indigenous weapons, but a lot of that will be indigenous weapons made in conjunction with those nations. So that money, again, swirls around the defense military industrial complex that benefits those corporations, those companies investing, and then benefits the countries from which those companies come. Hopefully that all makes sense. Right, okay. 2 men near Kiev. So I'm moving on from that. There's lots more I could say about that, but I'm going to move on. 2 men from Kiev have been found guilty of storing an anti-aircraft missile system and missiles used by Russia. They've actually captured a Russian system. So the 38 and 45-year-olds from Boryspil acquired the Tor system when the Russians were forced out of the northern region of Ukraine. The pair could face jail for 7 years. Now, this isn't like the NATO weapons going missing on the black market and all that kind of stuff. We've seen this before, where there was a guy near Kharkiv, I think, a farmer who had a Russian tank under tarpaulin he like nicked it. I don't know what he's gonna do with it. Maybe he was like, if the Russians attack Kharkiv again, I'm gonna sail out against them on my tank. Here they've got a Tor system and missiles. This is really high value, and Ukraine needs this. So it's just bizarre. People are people and they do weird things. But it's good that that's been found out, and hopefully that can be brought to bear against the Russians. Okay, Putin has asked former Wagner commander to create a volunteer unit or to create volunteer units for the Ukraine war. Russian President Putin instructed Andrei Troshev, the former chief of staff of the mercenary Wagner group, to form volunteer units for the war in Ukraine, according to a transcript of his speech. You yourself fought in such a unit for more than a year, Putin said. You know what it is, how it's done, and how about the issues that need to be resolved in advance so that combat work goes in the best and most successful way, Putin told Troshev in a meeting with a rather dodgy translation. But yeah, this goes... So, mutiny, Prigozhin's dead, Utkin's dead, head's been cut off the snake, snake's wriggling around, Putin goes, we're desperate, we need that snake's body. It can go and wriggle around in Ukraine. I mean, this is just another sign, as far as I can work out, that they are desperate for troops. They need mobilization. They don't want to do a mass national mobilization because it'd be political suicide. So we need those Wagner mercenaries back. I wonder what those Wagner mercenaries think about all of this themselves, because some of them were pretty peed off. Some of them have gone back to fight because their options are limited. And it's not very easy for them to assimilate back into society, integrate back into society. So they go back to Ukraine. Well, this is given the green light for others to do so. But I think it does tell you something about the state of affairs for the Russian mobilization. And as here, Anton Gerashchenko talks about it. We discussed, Putin, your involvement in forming volunteer units that can carry out various combat tasks, primarily in the area of special military operation, the war. Putin then emphasized that Troshin himself had been involved in the volunteer unit and he knows how it's done. He was awarded the title of Hero of Russia for the capture of Palmyra in 2016. He did not support the mutiny led by Prigozhin, so that's interesting. So he's chosen a very particular person to appeal to here, not one of the very much pro-mutiny people. Surovikin, for example, is somewhere trotting around Algeria at the moment, staying away from windows. Okay. Here, this is very, very cool indeed. Right, if you remember, the the Bond film Die Another Day, where you had invisible cars, and you're like, oh, Bond's just gone really unrealistic and stupid. This is ridiculous. Well, science fiction becomes fact, doesn't it? British company has created an invisible shield. The shield, this has nothing particularly to do with Ukraine, but just what military applications could this be used for, I wonder? The shield relies solely on optics, not requiring an energy source to create magic. The device is based on the use of special lenses that scatter light. The invisibility screen is compact in size and weighs about 1 kilogram, which makes it quite portable. It is important that the device functions without being connected to additional power sources. Let's just have a look at this. This is so cool. Just, it's not perfect, but that is pretty damned amazing. Where are its legs? This is pretty cool. Where is he? Where they're hiding? Bit of hide and seek. That just looks like a kind of barrel or something. Not there. It's absolutely incredible. So cool. I mean, I don't know how you would apply this, how useful it would be, but I'm pretty sure it does have some pretty tasty applications in the world of military. Right, moving on. This is something I've said before, but I'm going to say it again because I do keep hearing stuff like this, which is, the US are amazing, right? This is nothing. This is not criticism of the US. This is criticism of people who say stuff like Europe needs to pick up the slack. This is not America's war, or more that we're doing all the spending, and it's about time Europe sort themselves out, etc., etc., all that kind of stuff. And I still see it. And this is a corrective to that. So which countries provided the most aid to Ukraine? The largest amount was given by the EU institutions, 85 billion euros, with almost all of it being financial aid. Then is the USA, with most aid being military, next to Germany, Great Britain and Norway. Right. What's interesting here, and this is from the beginning of the war to July the 31st, 2023. So this is a couple of months out of date now. But what's interesting here is that when you look at the EU, it's understanding that 25% EU or something around there is funded by Germany, 25% by France. So actually, you can add that on to, say, Germany, and it gives you a true representation of where Germany is. Or you can add Germany's bilateral or unilateral aid onto the EU. And in fact, you can add Germany onto the EU. Norway's a bit funky. Poland, Netherlands, Denmark, all the EU nations that are given their own separate bilateral stuff, add that onto the EU. And the EU contributions as a block of countries far outstrips the US. So when someone says, blah, 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 EU needs to sort themselves out, or Europe needs to sort themselves out, there are countries in Europe that are individually not pulling their weight. And that is absolutely true. But to tar everyone with this anti-European brush is really problematic, because there are European countries that have done more than the US, or Europe as a whole has done more than the US. Okay, it's got 500 million population versus 370 million, so there's that to look at. But look at the GDP. Then when you look at GDP, aid as compared to GDP per capita or whatever, then there are certain nations that have done more than the US and so on. So it's not a competition. It's like everyone does as much as they can. That's brilliant, okay? But it's realizing that there are some countries actually that are proper rubbish at giving support. So it's like looking at those nations and pointing them out and saying, well, what's going on there? We're looking at you, Hungary and maybe Slovakia and other nations, Eastern Europe, or even Italy, and you could even argue France. But then to say Europe as a whole needs to sort themselves out, well, actually, no. Europe is giving about what the US is given in terms of per capita. They're about the same. So let's stop this nonsense and just be positive and say, well done, US, you're amazing. Without the US, they'd be screwed. You know what, EU? Amazing. Without the EU, they'd be screwed. Because all this financial aid that's going to Ukraine to allow them to keep their country going, if that wasn't there, they wouldn't be able to fight their army. There would be you need all components for the country to operate and for it to defend itself. And everyone together is just doing the right stuff. So let's be positive about everyone. Awesome US, awesome EU. Right. Okay. Let's now go to geopolitical. And I told you it's going to be a long one. There's so much to talk about, and I've been doing this half an hour. So, in fact, what I'm probably going to do is leave that there for the military aid, upload this, and then do the geopolitical one next because there's that much going on. So, thank you so much for all of your support, guys. All your kind of support is amazing. Thank you, and I'll speak to you very shortly.